I'm the Chief Growth Officer of DeepCrawl, and today's webinar is obviously aptly titled Battle of the Backlinks. I have a great panelist with it today, Mr. Dixon Jones from Majestic, who is their Marketing Director. Welcome, Dixon, to the webinar, and thanks for coming along.
John, how are you?
I'm really good, mate. I'm really good. And obviously the whole day, the next part, and just to give you an idea of what we're going to try and do over the next hour is, as if you've attended our webinars in the past, where we obviously had Leda on board and Eric Engie, going to give the floor to Dixon for the first 15 to 20 minutes to walk you through the whys and wherefores of backlinks and what you need to think about from an SEO perspective. As we've always talked for years about backlinks, it's the currency of the web, and it drives a lot of signals for as Google perceives stuff. And then we'll get into that off the back end of Dixon's presentation. Hopefully we'll have some questions from you guys. I can see more and more of you joining as I'm chatting, which is great to see. And ask a question. Please just throw a question out there. We're going to field the questions, and I can throw the questions back at Dixon, and then we can both have a nice debate about it. And if we don't get that many, we'll talk about it, because I'm pretty certain between me and Dixon we can talk about backlinks for a good long hour, and we'll give you some good ideas as to practically what you can do with these things. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Dixon Jones, Marketing Director of Majestic, to give you the 15-20 minutes on the floor, Dixon, and let you show us your views on backlinks, because I know you know a hell of a lot about this sort of thing, mate. So over to you, sir.
That's brilliant. Well, hopefully my screens can show, you can see. If not, someone shout, please.
Absolutely, it's there.
That's good. So I'm going to go through a little bit about backlinks. Oh, I've just taken it off the main show. Hold on. There we go. And I'm going to start with, because you had Eric on and the last couple of meetings, I thought I'd start with this, which was a study that Eric Engie and Stone Temple did last year, actually, and it was really looking at whether links are still a powerful ranking factor. And they kind of decided to try and do some raw research. A lot of research is in the SEO world, as you know, is opinion and not a lot of study, and there's a huge amount of bias, I think, in our decision making. So it's great when studies come out that actually test one site with lots of links versus one without links that have got the same sorts of things. And obviously they did come out with some interesting stuff. You can see 65 comments on that article there, and they did come out with it is still a big ranking factor, which obviously wasn't a surprise to me, but I think it needs validating, and we need to go back to that question regularly, because Yandex famously tried to stop linking as a ranking factor, and their results went to pot. And I remember talking with some Googlers in the past, and they said they had tested not using links, and the results kind of went to pot. So it's a pretty important signal. And it's not just the third-party information. Google themselves do occasionally make it obvious. This guy, Andrew Lipatsev, was doing a Google Hangout with Amin Johns, I think, and a crowd of people. And he's a Russian Google engineer. And he said, in March last year, that links, content, and rank brain are still the top 3 ranking signals in Google search algorithm. Now, Barry jumps on, Barry who wrote the Search Engine Land article, Barry Schwartz there, does jump on everything that any Googler says and talks about it, which is great. But of course, it's out of the ears and onto the page. So quite often Googlers will talk candidly, and then it's accepted as fact. But it's a nice thing to see there. And then this T-shirt here is also one that's out there, which was Google Gary, as we know him now. It's a quote he had, and he's getting really annoyed that these T-shirts are wandering around SEO conferences because it's keeping the focus on links. But clearly that suits my agenda, so hopefully at least he knows why it comes out there. So he said that last year as well, and he said another thing as well earlier this year. He said on Twitter, and you can track this down if you want, that we're still using the PageRank algorithm, along with hundreds of other signals, because he wants to get things in context, obviously, in rankings. So the PageRank algorithm is not dead. I think a lot of people say it is because you can't get it online anymore, and you can't see it. That doesn't mean to say it's outside the algorithm. The PageRank algorithm is really, really powerful, and so hopefully we can talk a little bit about why it's powerful. You don't also need third-party corroboration to understand why links matter. If you really think about links, there's only two ways of getting to a website. Either you type in www.deepcrawl.com into your browser, if you've still got a URL line in your browser, or you click on a link. And before you click on that link, as a human being, you probably have some kind of concept of where that link's going. You've got some idea of what kind of content you're going to get to when you click on the link. You've got an idea of the reach, of how many people talk about whether it's going to go to, say, a big site like the BBC or a little personal blog. You've got some idea of the relevance. Presumably it's related to the content that you're already reading, otherwise there shouldn't be a link or not one that you click on. You've got an idea of intent, of influence, timeliness. Is it evergreen content you're about to see, a research paper, for example, or is it newsworthy content that's just about to just new? You know this before you're going to click on it. You've got an idea of meaning, power, passion, all of these kind of adjectives. Which verbs are adjectives. English not my strong point, clearly. These are all things that you can understand intuitively as a human being, and that's why a link is intrinsically so powerful, because there's so much information that is in that link even before you click on it. So it makes sense, and that's really why Majestic exists, how Google became as big as it was, and why Majestic exists as well. So with that in mind, we did some work with BuzzSumo. Now BuzzSumo, if you haven't tried them, they're a social media influencer tool, and I'm sure you have seen them, John, of course, but for those that are listening, we did some research with them to look at the differences between why people share content and why people link to content. And I thought that would be really interesting to bring out in this sort of battle of the links, and say, well, if you're not going to build links, then you're probably building tweets and shares and other things to try and build your brand. So I thought it would be really helpful to sort of have a look at these two differing but similar kind of marketing channels, if you like, digital channels. And it turns out, so Steve Raiston did most of the hard work on this, but it turns out that people share content if it's entertaining, to nourish relationships, certainly, to get the word out about things that they care about. So passion, I think, is what happens in the left-hand column here. And they're out to share helpful and valuable content and to be really part of a tribe. So in things like Facebook and Twitter and stuff, we tend to talk to our tribe, whether our tribe is SEOs or whether our tribe is people that play chess or people that like kittens, whatever. It's probably a bit generic, the kittens one. But we like to associate ourselves, and we use the web a lot in social to define ourselves, really. Links, however, are possibly the other side of the brain. They're a bit more rational. To create a link on a web page requires a little bit more thought, and so it's more that people will link to content if it's supporting an argument that they're making, if it's sharing authoritative content that they're willing to stand behind, that they're happy to put on a blog page, and it's going to last the test of time. They're going to need to if they're going to research, if they're going to give facts and things, particularly because they need that to back up an argument. Sometimes long-term content, such as guides and things, people will link to if it's something much more in-depth and beyond the scope of a web page, for example. Then people will often link to that. And then the other two things here are sharing new information, although that would apply to the left-hand side as well. But also sharing data that changes. If you're writing content, then you often have to talk about data that changes, and you've got to link to the actual data because that's changing in real time. So these are two sort of intrinsic. You could think about them as left brain, right brain kind of activities, I think. But then, having said that, the question comes along, because links are thought about in terms of SEO, and the next question that tends to come along is, well, okay, I need links. I need them for ranking, which I don't think is necessarily why you need links. I don't think that's the reason you need links at all. I think you need them for all the reasons that I've said in the last few slides. But the next question tends to be from a CEO or from the the guy you're selling your services to, or the girl that you're selling your services to, well, how many links do I need then? And it's really not that simple, and that goes to the heart of the PageRank algorithm. So the problem is that links have wildly different strengths. However you measure strength, you know, a link from the homepage of the BBC is going to be much more influential in pretty much any context, I would say, than a link from, you know, mypersonalwebsite.com. Links have wildly different strengths, partly because of who says it, partly because of the brand or the equity or the value of the web page that's there behind it. And that really messes up the argument how many. It's not a case of how many, it's have you got the right ones. The other reason that it's difficult is because internal links particularly affect the strength of a web page, particularly in the PageRank algorithm. And that's the Majestic algorithm kind of maps. It doesn't map the PageRank algorithm, but it uses the same kind of principles. So and internal links can hugely affect things. So if you're looking at counting the number of links to your website or to your web page or to your piece of content, then not only are all the different pages different strengths, but those pages can be influenced by the internal link structure of the website as well. The great thing, though, is that we can estimate page strength, and of course, PageRank was the prime algorithm for that. But you know, I think it's not Page Authority. I think it's MozRank is their maths that tries to emulate that. But certainly, Majestic's Trust Flow and Citation Flow both emulate that idea that if one page links to another page, then things change. So even though in this example, so this is something out of the our what we call our bulk backlink checker, I took a bunch of pages that rank for Majestic in this case, and you can see that the number 3 result there is, when I tried it, came up number 3, I think, in the States for the phrase Majestic, and yet it's only got 38 links coming into it from other web pages, whereas the one above it has 8,000, the one below it 1,500, and that's really because whatever MarcusTheatres.com is, they've got strength, and cumulatively the strength of the website is in this case, you know, got a value of 27. That's a number out of 100. That's our maths, not Google's maths or anybody else's maths. And there is some correlation, weak correlation, I'd say, between rankings and flow metrics. It's clearly not causation because it's nothing to do with Google. But you know, there's certainly very much less correlation between backlinks and rankings. And then this is the heart of the reason. This is kind of like a microcosm of the PageRank algorithm here. If you imagine this is the whole web, or you know, a section of the web, then if these are all pages on the web, then this page, this page marked A, is probably more influential than page B, even though page B has 3 pages linking into it and page A only has 2. If this is all links from pages, if page A links to page B, links to page C, links to page D, some of the influence, according to the PageRank algorithm, from page 1 goes all the way through to page 5, 6, and beyond. So this is a massive mathematical formula that will change the value of a web page based on how the rest of the world is seeing that web page and linking to it, and not just linking to that web page, but how people change their links to the pages that link to that page, and so it iterates all the way back. So PageRank is what I describe as an iterative decay algorithm. And so some of the love from many pages away will eventually make it to your page, but only a tiny little bit. And that's the nature of the algorithm. That's really what's made PageRank so powerful. And that's why the flow metrics algorithm is there, because we're trying to emulate that concept, not the same maths, but that concept. So hopefully that kind of explains PageRank to those that you know, didn't see it in that kind of way. But it also answers the question of how many links is enough, because you know, you could say, you know, none or 1, because all you need is internal links to a page, and it could still rank. And it's also not just links, of course. There's context as well. So going back to the BuzzSumo stuff, and taking some of those. I just wanted to go through in the last few minutes, well, probably have to take 7 minutes. I'm sorry if I go a little bit over the 20 minutes, but we can chat afterwards. 7 examples of good link tactics, or sort of understandable link tactics based on this research from BuzzSumo. The first one actually has nothing to do with BuzzSumo, really low-hanging fruit or 404s. Basically, everybody should start there. If you've got links to your website that are linked to pages that no longer exist, then that's a real easy way to get links, because it means somebody's linking to a page on your website which for whatever reason doesn't exist. It may be that they've lost they mistyped it, or it may be that you've changed the content on the site, but for whatever reason, it's actually quite an easy thing to fix, a 404, and you can 301 it through. There are 3 different ways you can find that information: through your raw log files, if you're that way inclined, through Google search, or through a third-party tool like Majestic or Moz, which also those tools will allow you to look at it for your competitors or for your clients without having to have access to those things like Google search or log files as well. The second thing was also something that you can have in your it's in your own domain to control, and that's the internal link trick, really, which is find underperforming pages on your website that should be ranking, and then logically link to them internally, because every time you do that, you will improve the page value, if you like, of that page. So the one thing that you should work out there is that you only have so much juice in your site to go around. So you don't want to overdo this. You've got to understand that if you're doing this, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. So you want to make sure that your links are well focused towards your, you could say money pages, but your important pages where you want them to rank, where they should be ranking. But as you do that, then you're going to be subtly changing your own link profile in the process. So you can find them through rank checking. Finding things that rank on page 2 or page 3 is a really good way to do it. Again, Moz and Majestic metrics. You could also look at the ratio of traffic to search referrals. And interestingly, just a couple of weeks ago, there was a report that came out, in fact it was last week, from SEMrush, that there may be a correlation, whether it's causal or not, between direct traffic and search traffic. That's a whole different question, way beyond today. We can talk about it, but it's not my data. You know, I put this ratio of traffic in there before that study came out. So this, the third one on the list, I think, was original sites and research. Here's a good example. So the Stone Temple thing that we saw before was original data, and this was a BuzzSumo study. So this is a screenshot out of BuzzSumo's tool, but they can see. So hopefully, yeah, I've got it here. So these are different pages on Stone Temple, and you can see that on this particular example, this is their article. On the second column from the left is a number of links that this article got. It got 285 links when I recorded it, by far the most. The article below, 9 links, the one below, 5 links, which is, you know, significant really, because you know, they've written some original content, and then people are much more willing to link to that than to a lot of other things that that may be just commentary. Another example of that, this is an article that's more generic. Somebody worked out that millennials had overtaken baby boomers in America as the largest group, and that article from Pew Research suddenly got 1,748 links coming into it, which is, you know, significant really. So if it's a more accessible piece of content, but still raw content, then it can pick up links. This is an example of some referenceable content. So you can write something much more in-depth, and it's so in-depth that no one's going to try and copy it or report to it, so they'll just link to the original content. Of course, you have to have some kind of use on some kind of influence yourself for that content to be worthwhile. But that was on Social Media Examiner, and again, that article, 513 links compared to, you know, stuff before, 84 links and 41 below, significantly more links because of the quality of the content and that it was referenceable. valuable. This is an article that Danny Sullivan wrote before he moved from Search Engine Land to Google, and it was all about the Google RankBrain algorithm, and it was at a time when everyone was discussing things and talking about things, but there was no real consolidated place for sort of authoritative or backed up content. And Danny Sullivan is a good person for writing that information, and he wrote everything that he could see, backed it all up, and put it down in one piece, and it became a very, very valuable resource. It's showing it in a different way now, because we can see something like 9,500 pages on the internet linked to that site, and this is from 1,000 referring domains, and this is actually using the Majestic toolbar, which you can use, but same idea. And then lastly, data-driven content is useful. It's not, you can't just link to, you can't just put the weather on the site and expect it to be the same. But there's a danger here. So this is AccuWeather, for example. Massive amount of links coming to the AccuWeather page. 144,000 from 257 just going to the UK weather. But you've still got to be an authority. So the word of warning here is that the BBC is going to trump you in this example using the same raw data. They've got 395,000 links from 6,000 websites. So you can't just be the authority by linking to somebody else's data. And then really, it's not just about the content that you're trying to get out there. It's also how you get it out. And if you do it in the right kind of order, if you try and engage with the influencers first, then the influencers are much more likely to link to content if they're the first ones to know about it. And that's really really key, I think, when you're launching stuff. It's not just about the content. You don't want it to be a brochure that you leave underneath the stairs. You've got to get that brochure out, and you get it out in the right way is going to make it a lot better. And these 4 bullet points are trying to do that. So that's it, really. If you're going to make a post, if you're going to have content, if you're going to get links, then for God's sake, try and do something. Make it, I don't know, make it different, make it controversial, authoritative, referenceable, something you can reference, or have some new facts that no one's ever seen before. Is it going to be data-driven? Do something like that. Whatever you do, make it valuable. And that's kind of the slides that I wanted to start with, and hopefully got some thoughts. How do people feel? Is there anything there?
Perfect. Thanks, Dixon. There is. You'll be pleased to know we got questions, which is wonderful to see.
It's always a good start, isn't it?
It's always a good start, which is nice. I've been watching them kind of coming in, kind of thing, and there's quite an interesting spread as well. So there's certainly some stuff for us to get our teeth into and have a chat about. So I'm going to open up with the first question that I did get, which was basically around subdomains. So I mean, the question is basically, do backlinks create it to a subdomain, pass link juice to the root domain or to other subdomains? So.
Right. So it's a really good question, and I'm going to give you my opinion of the answer. And it's, sometimes SEOs say, well, it depends. I don't know. It depends. Some people say this, some people say that. I'm going to say this, and I believe this with my heart. PageRank, as well as trust flow and citation flow for that matter, PageRank, the maths, the calculation was always done at the page level and not at the domain level. Now, I'm not saying that domains don't matter. I am saying that the maths is done at the page level. So page A links to page B. It didn't in the original algorithm make any difference whether that page A or page B was on the same domain, different site, different subdomain, whatever. It's just a page. The problem, so yes, it does pass through, but people have a tendency to think about domain authority is a word that comes up, but that's not a concept that was in the original algorithm. So at Majestic, we don't have page authority, we have or domain authority, but we do wrap up all of our maths so that we got a concept of the value of a website. But you know what? Our calculations are also done at the page level, exactly as Google's are, and wrapping it up is, I think, confusing in some ways, because actually you can't compare the trust flow of a domain with the trust flow of a subdomain. And actually the original maths was done at the page level, so I would, if I have the chance, I would compare page with page. So I would compare the homepage of the BBC with the homepage of ITV, if I was trying to compare those two, for example, because all the internal links will always link to the homepage anyway, so the juice will tend to usually be going to the homepage, and at least you're measuring apples with apples instead of apples with oranges. And a visual way of saying that, or another way of saying that, is BBC is a great website, or Mashable is a great website, but delve down into it, you will find pages on the BBC that used to be important. They used to be important when Typhoon Irma was coming 3 days away, but really now it's past and it's on and it's moved on, and the page is not linked to in any way from the BBC. If there's no pages from the rest of the web there, then it's of no purpose. So pages die, and that's PageRank was a machine learning algorithm. So my answer is the calculation's done at a page level, and internal links do the rest.
No, and I wouldn't disagree with you. I think as well, just to wrap it up to the domain level, I think it's fair to say at some point the subdomain is going to link to the main domain. So, in theory, if it's all cleaned up in the right way, it should pass value back into the main domain as it stands today. So, if you brought it to that domain level, I totally agree with you, mate, on the page by page scenario for sure.
You can look at it another way as well, couldn't you, John? Because when you go to Google, Google never gives you a domain as a result. It'll give you a home page or it'll give you an inner page. It doesn't give you domains, so that's fundamentally important, I think.
No, I totally agree with you, mate. Which probably leads quite nicely to the next question. I mean, we were talking about trust flows before, and it's given that Google ignore a lot of links based on factors like real-time penguin and potentially the erosion of trust through obviously cumulative things like disavow data. How valid are those flow metrics in today's world? Can you only show
okay. That's a very fair question as well. That's a very fair question as well. So I think that it is important to realize that Majestic's data or metrics were not designed to emulate Google's ranking information, if you like. So we have our own map of the web, which is worked out with our own maths. We also if you've got a page with a very low page trust flow or citation flow, whichever maths you use, it's going to produce tiny amounts of value onto the next page. So, and if it's got 10 links on the page, then it's going to, as opposed to one, and that's going to dissipate the citation flow, if you like, even quicker. So, so we do also dissipate, just not with the same algorithm and not with the same sense. However, I think it is also fair to say that it's not easy to say whether an individual page is passing juice in Google's eyes. I could say that if it's got a low flow metrics, it's probably not going to pass very much value. And I think that having that data is much more powerful than trying to make an intellectual guess if you're seeing that page in isolation. If you see the page in isolation, it's very difficult to, if it's well constructed as a page, it's very difficult to understand whether it has the votes of the web, if you like, which ultimately goes down to links, but potentially only just a few links, because the big links are logarithmically much more valuable than the small ones, certainly in our maths and in Google's maths. So, so one big link can make up, can easily account for 1 million small links, even in our math.
It's the old quality versus quantity argument, isn't it? At the end of the day,
absolutely.
It's going back a few years when all the people used to go and build links at speed and at mass volume, and Google kind of used to accept the fact that there was all these links going in until they kind of tweaked the dial, and we saw some pretty notable websites crash and burn as the dial moved away from just actually volume of links to the domain, and looked at speed and actually how they were being built as a link footprint.
And of course Penguin went backwards as well. The original Penguin did start penalizing all sorts of people left, right and center, and they kind of affected penalty on backlinks, and they've said I believe that they now don't penalize you for having crappy links, because they were trying to, but then again, I've heard a lot of people saying the disavow file is good, and there may be a question on disavow files as well. What I would say is that in our metrics, if you've got lots and lots of machine generated links or easily generated links, then that will tend to push up the citation flow score much faster than it pushes up the trust flow score. And then in our metrics, that's used by a lot of more advanced SEOs to weed out the difference between a good link and a bad link. But it's not the same math as Google, not the same not the same reality necessarily. But it's a good reality of the web.
I agree, and I think it's interesting how you're talking about the page as well, Matt. There's an interesting question here from Ian Fenton, which kind of takes me back a little bit as well in some respects. It's kind of asking which is more valuable. A link, we think about the days when we used to put links at the end of the articles and the footers and stuff like that, and you could go about building up good footer links, which doesn't really support the article, at all in some respects, but it comes from a high profile website. Or a link, which I would look at it as well in the sense of obviously linking within the article that is maybe less value in the sense of the site that it comes from, but actually is within the article and is relevant within the article. What would your view be on
Right. Okay. Well, now I do have two different experiences that I can share. I certainly in the past, in spite of what everyone said, a powerful website with footer links has been able to affect some really big terms, and I've seen that firsthand. But that was before the new Penguin, and actually probably Panda probably was most likely to have affected those. I'm old now. I'm going to be 53 on the weekend. So
you've just given your age up in a webinar, mate.
I have, yeah, but we don't know which year this was written. So, it was written in 10 years from now. So I have seen that work very effectively. So I don't want to diss that because someone will find statistics to disprove. What I would say is that to prove that the footer links still work very well, and they may well do. What I would say is that we have seen algorithms that do strip out the main content on a page and treat that and have the ability to treat that with more respect than menu links. So it's entirely possible, but I think that's more of an on-page factor. So maybe there's an on-page weighting there that when the link's not there. So that may not propagate quite so far or so fast. I don't know. I would go for a good link in the middle of a page is better for a human being, usually.
Yep, agreed.
However, a footer link can still be very, very valuable. The problem is that if it's out of context, then it's really, really bad. So there was a time when all of a sudden, so all the influential bloggers used to link to each other, and we all had links to each other. I say we, I got a few, and that helped. I think that has gone away because I think that was seen as a bit of a bad signal. But the truth of the matter is, influential people in any industry will tend to talk to each other, and they will tend to reference each other, and so links make a good proxy for that. So, a footer link is not all bad, but
no. I totally agree with you though. It probably ties back into one of the slides that you presented earlier on. I mean, the way that you go about this sort of thing. Because I know the networks that you were talking about, we all used them years ago, kind of thing, and we won't get into that because that's.
Are you saying that we've done things that Google doesn't approve of?
Quite possibly. I'm sure every SEO out there in the world today has done something that Google probably doesn't approve of. But it probably relates back to that slide you had around about shared content and linking to content. I mean, these two things probably work quite well in that sense. If you're linking to content, you probably might stick it in the footer because it's a link and it's an authority link. But actually, the sharing of the content. I mean, most shares on content these days gets pushed out in a PR newsworthy kind of manner to notable news sites that want to carry fresh and unique content, and the link would tend to sit within the article itself. And yes, it'll have an effect on rankings, but more so it's the fact that it's on the high authority site and it's driving footfall and it's driving traffic to the website external to Google ranking. And I don't know what you think about that, mate.
Well, I think that there's another way of looking at that as well, and saying internal link structures tend to define your world, and if you and everybody links to their homepage pretty well from the footer. So the site-wide links will link to from the logo and the footer back to the homepage, and the homepage is the most common one to appear in Google search results. So that answers your question a little bit about footer links and things. There is another, I'm sure, algorithm that is not to do with the link algorithm, but there's one that goes around checking to see whether you've manipulated footer links. And those kind of algorithms are one step removed from my white hat preaching, I suppose. But they're certainly coming in, and so if Google can spot these were done to manipulate, then frankly you're gonna get told, I would imagine.
No, I agree. I think I totally agree, mate. It's interesting. We've got Kyla Becker and who's chipping in on that as well, and she's making probably quite a similar point in some respects. That she's saying that understands that Google understands footer linking and only counts one, counts the one instance when encountered today rather than multiple, which is I think is probably pretty fair to say. And in the same manner with obviously contextual links as well. I think Google's getting clever enough to understand where the link sits within the content.
I'd explain the maths differently, though. I'd say that Google puts a value on every single web page on your site, and that your internal link stuff will affect that calculation. But ultimately, it's still the value of the page on the site, and then its context that's going to be there. And if you're going to put footer links to all the other pages on your website, then it just spreads the juice around, really. So. I wouldn't say there's necessarily one link only. I would say that ultimately there's only so much juice, and it doesn't matter how many more links you make to it. If you're doing it from the same number of pages, it's not going to make much difference.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair to say. So it's kind of shifted because in some ways everybody's talking about mobile. Things are afoot, things are coming, as we all know. There's a lot of talk about Google and what Google's going to do next year. Jamal's asking a question, basically, why will backlinks lose value when mobile first rolls out? As we're expecting.
If you're asking, will they lose value when mobile first rolls out, or why will they lose value?
Why will they lose value? I think it's as simple as that. I mean, I think it's a pretty simple answer to that in some respects.
I don't think they'll lose value. I don't think they'll lose value. I think if you take away all the elements of if you have a mobile experience, the last thing you want to do is type in www.deepcrawl.com. What you want to do is click on something or put your finger on something. So
we kind of hope people will type in www.deepcrawl.com, but certainly from my perspective.
Well, actually, what you want to do is to say, okay, Google, take me to DeepCrawl, which they should do for sure. Yeah. But it's basically a link. So the need for links is even more important in mobile than it is in a desktop environment. What I would say is that you should build a responsive site, and if you do that, then you're going to be in a much better place than unless you happen to be in the news industry and you've got to get into the news feed and things. And I think there's some stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think the key there, what you say, mate, is the mobile piece. I mean, Google has come out and they've openly come out and said that they will use, obviously, links to mobile pages will be used within the link graph. And obviously, when they move towards mobile first indexing, they're going to use those links, and they're even saying, I mean, in a lot of respects, they're saying they're going to clean that all up by us, obviously the rel alternate tags, and obviously take the links across the desktop site, take the links that might be into AMP pages, and actually, move those through and into bringing those links into the actual mobile page. So I think if you do the proper cleanup work,
we'll see when it all comes out and live. But if you've built yourself a responsive site, then you won't have a problem. But it does mean, of course, if you've got a lot of spammy links that don't appear on the responsive on the mobile version, then absolutely, then that changes the landscape just by the nature of the links that are out there. So I think that's a very fair point, very valid point. I suppose we could. Okay, this isn't in my roadmap, but maybe I should. We could change our crawler to try and get the responsive version of web pages and redo all the maths on there. But first and foremost, I think we want to see what actually happens, and we want our own view of the web. We don't want to assume or try and copy somebody else's view of the web, even though Google are pretty important. But yes, I think mobile first is going to be very interesting. It's certainly going to change the results when they do that. But until we see it all, there's a certain amount of speculation in what we're going to all see.
No, totally. I mean, I think it's something that we're all waiting for, and I mean, mobile's the tip of everybody's tongues, and it's at every conference. I'm sure it'll be the next conference. I'm at one tomorrow, and I'm sure
Well,
we'll talk about it. So,
certainly Gary. I saw Gary, Google Gary. I've seen him at two conferences in the last month or 6 weeks, saying if you go responsive, then you don't have to do anything else. So that's not to say that you have to go responsive, but that's your easiest route as a webmaster.
Good comeback there, mate, because I was going to disagree with you big time. I think, Google's put the stance out there and said, just get responsive and don't worry about it. I just think that makes their route to mobile first index a lot easier for them, kind of thing. They love their AMP pages. They want you to just sit it in responsive mode, and they want to kind of let you flow in that sense. So they don't want to have to go and clean up all this parity.
So are you saying, and disagreement's great, you and I have had plenty of arguments in the past, are you saying that Google would rather everybody went onto AMP pages because, well, it's faster for the user?
It's faster. It's stripped down HTML, it's quicker, it's faster for them to be able to actually get that content, index that content into their index, and it probably saves them quite a lot of legwork. So the reason I don't think, yeah, okay. Go on, mate.
The reason I don't think that will become preferential in the long term to responsive is that it will follow the same history that things like the no-follow tag had. So the no-follow tag, for those that are as old as I was going to say as old as us, as old as me, that was agreed at the time by Yahoo and Microsoft and Google and Yandexes. We're all going to accept this protocol so that SEOs can stop spamming the search results, or webmasters can put no-follows in. And when they did the maths, a few years later, it was a fraction of 1% of links had no follow attached to them, and then those that did were pretty much SEOs trying to, manipulate, page rank or sculpt page rank in a different way. So it didn't have enough catch up for them to make it a positive ranking factor. And I don't think there will be enough people who care enough about Google to make their pages AMP. Because outside of our industry, there's a lot of people who just can't be bothered. It's not at the top of their agenda. So I think that they may want that, but just like no one got onto Google to Google Hangouts and stuff, and we're using GoToWebinar, I think effectively they're not going to get the traction that they need to do that. But I could be wrong.
I think you're fair in what you say, kind of thing. It's just been interesting for me to watch Google this year, and be it Gary or be it John Mueller, talking heavily about get responsive, you'll be fine, kind of thing, and obviously also the varied tag, and making sure you've got the varied tag in place so they can make a call against mobile and desktop. And a lot of it to me just kind of says it speeds up their ability to just understand what's going on out there. So thinking about social links as well, I've got a question in here around social links, and it's as simple as Erin Barnhart's asking the question is how much authority do links on social media carry compared to what we would treat as generalized links, and actually doing the link building footprint. Do we think socials as potent as?
Right. Okay. So the problem for social links is that at their heart they're usually behind a walled garden for Googlebot. So Googlebot is unable to see everything on Facebook, for example. That doesn't mean to say that they're not valuable, but they're essentially what might be described as the dark web. Dark social, in that a bot will not see that because they're seeing because when you put it out there, it's to your friends only. So your Googlebot is not your friend. Isn't that something we can put down? Googlebot is not your friend. And that's
a t-shirt there, isn't
it? Yeah, it is. And now I'm going to get told that I don't love Google. So most social links, I think, fail for that reason. If you're going to say, do they count towards rankings? That doesn't mean to say that having a good profile on Twitter, for example, your Twitter profile is visible. So it may be that Google goes to your Twitter profile. I would strongly recommend that you put your Twitter profile linking to your main blog page or your company or whatever, because it can see that, and it's allowed to see that, actually, because it's got the Twitter feed anyway. It can see the Twitter data as well, but it's feeding that into a different part of the algorithm and to a different section. So you would then see the Twitter results independently of the web pages, or for that matter, universal results or images or other bits and pieces. So when Google brings back results for any given phrase, there are a bunch of computers in Google that poll for rights to be on that page. So image search polls to be on that page. YouTube or video results poll to be on that page. Local polls to be on that page, traditional 10 blue links kind of results poll to be on that page. So all of those different systems within Google are all saying, yeah, somebody typed in the word video. I've got an 80% case YouTube algorithm to put results there, and so that's why you see a breakup of different types of results on the page when different things happen. Sometimes you see the local at the top, sometimes you see the images at the bottom, whatever it may be, and it gets knocked around. That's because some machine algorithm has voted before those results come back. It's also why you see potentially the same web page twice on the page, because those two different things are coming back, and they can potentially put the same URL on the page at the same time. But that just means that social can then go into a slightly different bucket for Google, and I think that most social links don't pass PageRank. It doesn't mean to say that they're not passing some kind of value and may still result in listings.
No, I totally agree. I think it's probably minimal in the value that it gives you from a Google ranking point of view. But again, it's back to that conversation of social content and pushing out links to pages that maybe don't directly attribute value to ranking on Google, but definitely drive traffic and footfall to the website for sure. So there's definitely a place for that.
There's a huge amount of stuff going around that all goes around the notion of brand, and why other signals that aren't in the maths still can still affect things. And I think that this is part of it. If you create a conversation that's of value, then it pops out in different ways, and Google just picks up the signals in different ways if you can't get it directly from the social stuff.
No, it's a question actually from Paul Madden, is how important is brand?
Sorry, did you just say a question from Paul Madden?
I did, mate. Yeah, he's in here. Hi, Paul. Good to have you. How important is brand as a signal when compared to links in head terms rather than longer tail?
Yeah. Okay. So, first of all, I'd like to say, Paul, thank you very much. I just went for a 1,000-mile drive with the Kerbu guys last week outside Vegas, and we had a fantastic time. Secondly, whatever he thinks.
Do you guys do any work, or is it just?
It was on the weekend. It was
on the weekend. We'll not get into that. Yeah.
It was between PubCon and Ungagged. Sure. I think Paul wanted to we had a very good time. And whatever he says about his opinion about links is correct, because I wouldn't argue with him. If there's one person that knows more about links than me, I'd say Paul Madden. So I'm not answering his question based on the fact that he probably knows.
We'll move on to the next one then. So let's talk about EDUs and .govs then, because obviously we've talked about those for years.
I'd just like to say I hope Paul thinks that's a compliment, because that's what it is.
I'm sure it is in there somewhere. We'll ask him afterwards. We'll probably ping you on Facebook. But talking about EDUs and .govs, we've talked about them for years. And obviously we have, and we still talk about them today.
Yep.
Are they still the ones that everybody should be looking for? Are they still the ones that drive, strength of links? I mean, you talk about the BBC and stuff anyway. I mean, they're just huge authority sites, so there's that there. Yep. But obviously, the other part of the question is, .edus, .govs, what's the strength in, relative to say a .com or a .org? Obviously, if you take out things like a BBC kind of thing, which is obviously going to be a com, but it's a huge site. Mm-hmm. What's the value against the normal .coms?
I think that nothing has changed, and we always got it wrong. So I think that before we had other tools like Moz or like Majestic to try and measure these metrics, we had PageRank, but those tools were the only we had to rely on PageRank, but we didn't know how that came about. We didn't know the underlying. We knew the underlying maths, but we didn't have a view of the web of our own to be able to validate it or change it. And I think that the truth of the matter is that as humans, we used bias in there in our decision-making process, because a .edu we could see it was an educational site, and educational sites tend to have good links going into them, and they tend to be, if we had got the luxury of the maths, we would be able to see that there was a tendency for edu pages to have higher page rank, MOS rank, page trust flow, citation flow, or whatever it may be, just because of the nature of who they are, than a typical .com, if you like. I don't think there was a specific bit of the formula that said edu sites are stronger. I think that was a specific factor that an educational establishment linking to something probably was saying with more authority than a person who knew nothing about the subject matter linking. And I think that then encouraged links to the original source, which was the university site or the educational site, and that's what put it above. So it is natural for an educational site to have a certain degree of authority if it's a good educational site. But I think the underlying maths didn't change. So if you've got nothing else to go by, then yeah, an edu site may be more valuable than a .com.co.uk .net site, but that's not true for everything on the world. It's only true if it's an educational establishment that people understood. I'm pretty sure with a little bit of work, I could go and buy a .edu domain and get an edu domain and build a site. I don't think that will get me any closer to being, to having a good link.
No, but I think it comes down to an argument too, and Larry Mershman's just kind of thrown a question there about .edu pages kind of thing, and there's loads of websites out there. In that sense now, I think again it's right. It comes down to the old argument of I own a .com and the BBC owns a .com, but obviously saying that there's loads of websites that try for these sorts of links with scholarships and so on, and it just seems incredibly crowded lately, in the sense of the amount of those sites out there. Does that mean there's a lot of value in an edu? I think you just answered that at the end there, in the sense that if it's an established edu with an incredible trust within Google and a huge amount of pages, compared to you going and buying an edu, it's again that argument of just authority, isn't it, and how Google treats that.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm doing an MBA at Aston at the moment, so technically I'm a student as well, because I didn't have
links in there, mate.
I know, but this is the thing. I could probably go on to. I've probably got a personal blog page somewhere on aston.ac.uk where I could write something and link to myself. I haven't bothered to do that. Why? Because no one's linking to that page, not even aston.ac.uk. The maths wouldn't flow through. I don't really see that as a benefit for people, unless I'm doing something in the university that requires people to see that profile page. Then it would be valuable. So the vice chancellor's profile page, probably very, very valuable. But she's got a lot more influence in that world than I have.
Agreed. So shifting again about industries kind of thing. I mean, it's we're flying through. We've got 5 minutes left, sort of thing. But gambling sites have reared their heads. I didn't expect gambling not to appear from a linking point of view. The questions for me and Fenton again is kind of, does Google still heavily punish gambling links, or are gambling companies who are trying to grow their SEO finding ways to rank well despite being heavily involved with gambling? My answer to that would be, does Google penalize gambling links, in a sense, or is it just the way that it's being gone about?
So am I allowed to say I don't know the answer to that question?
I think it's fair to say. I mean,
I think sometimes people feel they should answer the question every time, whether they know the answer or not. I don't know the answer to that question. The closest that I've got from my experience is that we have the ability to topicalize pages. So we can say this page is in part about gambling and this page is in part about this, and so that would allow us, if we were to try and build out or something to that into a wider thing ourselves, that would allow us some ability. So if Google does the same sort of thing, then possibly they could, if they wanted to, they could penalize gambling links. But I don't know the answer to that question. I have not got experience in Google specifically penalizing gambling links.
Yeah, which I think that's my view on it as well. I mean, normally you get an incredible lot of bad sites in those areas, in those particular areas. I mean, it tends to be a case.
Yeah. Now they do penalise sites. Yeah, and then they link,
yeah.
and then all those links on those sites could well be poisoned, and that could be a problem. Yeah, and I think
that's my view on Google penalising gambling sites. I think it's the same with pharmaceutical sites. You get an incredible amount of just spam sites that just sit there on Google, and Google, rightly so, probably penalises those sites. So I mean, my view on it again would be to Google, has always, historically kind of, put down things like gambling and, pharmaceutical and stuff like that, just because the nature of it.
One other thing, do you remember, I think the first time you and I met, John, many, many years ago, was in a room with GoTo.com before they became Overture.
It was,
and
that was a while ago.
And they told me a very interesting thing that I think is valid to this day. They had the dilemma, it was PPC, but they had the dilemma of would they accept adverts for adult sites?
Yep.
And had a dilemma, which was if they didn't have ads for adult sites specifically, then every PPC ad would assume that something is anything but adult, and it would mean that adult then propagates into sort of places where they don't want adult sites to be seen. So actually, they had to have adult sites in their allowance, and then you tick the box so that allowed adult sites to go, because otherwise adult sites will end up being shown to kids. And then what are we on? Nearly, best part of 15, 18 years later, here we are, and we found exactly the same thing when we tried to do topical stuff. We didn't have a topic for adult category, and that meant that when you did try and categorize anything, you had to categorize an adult site as something. If you don't have a category for it, then it appears wrong. So I think that possibly there's something in there which is much deeper and beyond what we can talk about today. That I think gambling sites still have to have their place in the world, and Google needs to recognize their place. So they can't just kill off links for gambling sites per se, because it just means that gambling sites will then start appearing for pizza terms.
Absolutely agree. I totally disagree with you. Well, I mean, it's time is flowing, I'm afraid, and we're pushing up to 6 o'clock now, and obviously I'm sure there's a lot of people in the UK that have hung on work to kind of listen into us. So I'm gonna basically call us there, mate. There's been an incredible amount of questions, which is wonderful to see, and I thank everybody that's put a question in here. And I'm really sorry if we haven't been able to get to your question. We're just literally inundated. I've got 20, 30 odd questions here, which is wonderful to see. I think for me, I think we've talked about some really interesting topics, Dixon, and thanks for getting involved. And I really appreciate taking the time, mate, and coming on here and having the conversation with you. So thank you for that. We might look to circulate some of these questions and see if we can answer some of these on behalf of some of the people that are on here as well. Also, obviously, to any listeners that are in the US, a huge thank you for joining. I absolutely appreciate it. It's the day before Thanksgiving. We've had a really good attendance to the webinar, and for you guys that took the time, that might be on your way to Thanksgiving. I mean, it's a big time of year for the US, and I appreciate you guys coming in. So I wish anybody that's from America on here a happy Thanksgiving, and go and enjoy it tomorrow, and do what you Americans do at the end of the day. Obviously, also just for a DeepCrawl moment, we have a big offer for anybody that is here on the line today. We're giving a 20% discount on our annual subscriptions for Christmas as well. So please do take a look into that. Black Friday deal. It runs till 22nd of December, so go and grab it. And also just to mention as well, I mean, the reason Dixon's here as well and on the call with us is we're starting to ingest Majestic data into the DeepCrawl platform, and more so as the days go by. So it's not only that we're friends, we're partners now as well in the sense of the business world, and I think you guys will get a lot of value from seeing our two companies' data coming together in one platform and vice versa. So please do take your time to check that out and get on board with it. But this was Battle of the Backlinks. I'm John Myers from DeepCrawl. Dixon Jones, thank you very much from Majestic for taking the time to join us, and I bid you all a good night, and thanks very much, as I say, for taking the time to spend an hour with us. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.